Today we are going to be installing a new timing belt and water pump as well as balance shaft belt. And to get started on that, we're going to start disassembling things from the top of the engine bay. So we'll be removing the intake box, J-boot, the snorkel, and probably be cracking loose the spark plugs to allow us to turn the motor over more freely. And we'll also be disassembling the distributor cap. So we'll start with the intake box. It is Phillips screwdriver heads on the front and rear, as well as one right here and back there. We'll get the cover off, hose off, and then that'll allow us to gain access to the lower portion to remove that. $10mm on this hose. So we removed these from here and get this bracket undone for the air box, and then the air box should be free other than this coolant connection there. I would take this off here, but it's stripped in there. This breather off. Take this vacuum reference off of the J-boot, and then I can remove the J-boot. There's one more underneath here. Must be some sort of PCV system. Alright, now I'm going to be disconnecting the distributor cap plugs, and just for your own reference, this is 1, 2, 4, and 3. Let me double check that. There's Phillips screwdrivers in here. Phillips head screws, I should say. They don't have screwdrivers in them. Before you get too far, disconnect that battery, huh? Alright, we're using a stubby flathead. There's little ears. Very strange. So now we remove this hex head. Looks like maybe 3 mils or something. Alright, so when trying to remove my rotor, it broke. It looked pretty bad anyway, so I'm going to replace it. But now there's this brass fitting on the rotor connector that really doesn't want to come off. I sprayed some rust buster on there, and it's slowly coming free. This is crazy because the video I watched, I've seen 2 videos, and these guys literally just pull this right off the connector. So I don't know what's wrong with this one. Maybe it's original. It was in really bad shape. Next order of business is removing the radiator fans. So there's 10mm bolt there, somewhere in the middle, and then one on the far side, and then there will be some on the bottom. So I'm going to get the top ones while the car is still down, and then I'm going to jack the car up. Now we're going to remove the, well, there's supposed to be 3, but it appears there's only 2 down here. We should be able to. A fan connector. Looks like there's some zip ties that I'll need to snip to release the shroud from the fan harnesses. So now we are removing our accessory belt. If you have power steering, you would have a matching one of these over to the other side. This car just has an accessory belt for the AC and alternator. So we are shortening this rod in order to remove the tension that is on our accessory belt. Now we can start removing the timing belt cover, which is a bunch of 10mm bolts. There's a few more that I'll get from above. Alright, here's where we'll diverge a little bit. If you're not doing a water pump, you don't need to, if you're just doing a timing belt and balance shaft belts, you don't need to drain your coolant, but I'm doing my water pump, so I am going to drain the coolant here. This blue plug. You go crack the radiator cap off. Alright, so we are on the back of the bell housing. We're going to remove the harnesses on the starter. Here's our starter. And there's this little guy here, which looks like it is an 8, maybe a 12 up there. I'll move that aside, put the washer and the nut back on so I don't lose it. A bolt right here and a bolt right here. I guess that's like an 18 or something. Okay, so we have our cam lined up here. We've turned this over with a 24mm socket. And one thing you want to make sure is that this lines up, and then also dash in this window back here lines up with that little thing that sticks out. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but right there. Just because this is lined up doesn't mean you're at top dead center, because the crank spins twice. There's intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. So this spins twice for every rotation of the camshaft. So we have that set. We got our starter out, and now we are ready to lock the flywheel at top dead center. So we'll go get our flywheel lock. And take the accessory pulley off for 10mm bolts. Alright, now we can remove our balance shaft bolts. So 24mm, not 24mm. Now we're doing our water pump, so I believe in order to get this shroud off, I have to take the main crank pulley off. I already started it with like a 3-foot bar going. I may want to take tension off the timing belt first though. And take the idler off here. Maybe. Tensioner is a little different on the early model. 10mm off the guide. All right, the holes didn't line up on this plate thing, so I had to wedge just one of the slots in like this, and I was able to get it cracked loose. Now that it is loose, I should be able to realign these holes. Okay, all the other ones came off nicely. Why don't you come off nicely? All right, for this lower balancer pulley, balance shaft pulley, I was able to pry it out with this crow's foot thing. Got it started, I thought. There's a mark on here. I wonder if that means it's the top. So as you can see here, I had to go to the store and rent a pulley puller. I've got like an 11 mil impact socket to make up the difference here because this wasn't long enough. And I'm just slowly turning this, and it's slowly actually pulling the crank pulley off, which is good news for us. Alright, now I'm going to start disassembling the water pump. So we'll remove the lower radiator hose from the water pump, this heater hose coolant line. We'll disconnect this harness here, and then there's like 11 bolts that hold the water pump to the block. Millimeters. Where does this harness go to? And as I'm taking these off, I'm placing them on the new water pump so I remember where they go. And then once I pull the water pump out, I will be able to transfer it to the old one as my template. And then I'll know exactly where all these bolts go because they're not all the same length, unfortunately. Okay, now we are going to transfer stuff over to the new water pump. First thing, I did replace this already like a couple weeks ago, so I would recommend getting a new thermostat. You can buy them on FCP Euro or Pelican Parts or whatever, and then they come with both rubber O-ring thingies, which I'll show you as soon as this wants to come out. There's this O-ring seal. You need the thicker one for the modern water pump, which is what everyone kind of upgrades to. The recess on here is thinner on the older pumps. Fortunately, it looks like this was a modern pump, so I will manage to save the O-ring seal. I don't know if it goes on the back side or the front side. Now that I think about it, I'm wondering if it should have went on the back side. Oh wow, that is grody and falling apart. So I'm glad I got in here when I did. So now I'm going to transfer all these bolts that I saved just as my template over to the old pump. Got a long one there, got a long shorter one here, a couple short ones along the bottom. So really looks like all these outer ones that are bolts are the same size. Then you've got some nuts here in the middle, so those will line up with the studs on the block, with one extra long one right by the outlet. So we will place those there. All of those are done now. I feel like it should go O-ring first because that's your sealing surface there. I'm gonna just rinse this stuff off quick because that other pump has some debris. Alright, so, and if you, for whatever reason, yours ships without the O-ring, you can actually run it without. It'll just allow a little bit of coolant to leak past your thermostat, which just means it'll heat up. The car will warm up a little slower, which isn't ideal, but it's not the end of the world. And then if you're a non-turbo car, you want this white block-off plate. The pump came with the turbo block-off plate, which allows coolant to pass through here. For the turbo cars, there's a second thermostat for the coolant line running to your turbo. And then this white one is for NA cars. It literally just blocks this passage. You might also see some that are just like a metal plate. There's an O-ring under here, and then this is blocked. So you don't have coolant running to a turbo on the NA cars. So now I'm gonna go just clean up the surfaces before applying the new gasket to the block and then reinstalling the new water pump. We're gonna remove the Woodruff key from the balance shaft. I'm gonna remove the 3 13mm bolts, holding it in place. The cover in place. We have fresh seals and a fresh O-ring, and then fresh, I think it's like a Mylar washer. But there's our O-ring we'll remove. So the kit I bought has a replacement, what is this? Race? Sleeve, spacer sleeve, so I'm not too worried about damaging that because I have a new one, but I'm just getting in here with a flathead, try not to damage the housing portion. Now we can remove our sleeve, we'll replace that, this, and then on the actual balance shaft, there should be a thin Mylar gasket on here, but it looks like it's either, oh no, it's there. It is there. And we have a replacement for this as well. Crazy thin. FCP Euro kit comes with new washer thing, sleeve, and new O-ring, or seal. So we'll put the sleeve back in, put a new seal on, put a new washer on, and reassemble. And it should be the same for the bottom. Alright, so we're putting our new race on, we're gonna put our new seal on. Probably wanna grab a little bit of oil. Alright, and then replace our O-ring. Alright, and we'll get our new washer onto the balance shaft and we'll be able to reassemble. Using the mounting bolts to evenly sort of pull in that O-ring, trying not to tear it. I put a little bit of oil on it. .27mm knocked the spacer in a little bit more. We'll repeat that same process for the lower one. You may need to remove your power steering pulley for that one if you have power steering. I'm going to remove the accessory belt tensioner. One other thing to note, this lower one is 1mm larger. So we've got a 3048 by 7 versus a 3047 by 7. So just make sure you put the right one on. I could not find a Mylar gasket on here. I read online someone else didn't have one either for the very, very early 944s. I'm wondering if the previous owner, if this was ever replaced, they forgot to put one here. So I'm gonna put one here and hope that nothing explodes. Comment below if you think that's a dumb idea or not. Who knew? Learn something when you read a little bit. Clark's Garage says you should apply a light coating of bearing grease to the O-ring, this O-ring surface, and then these guys, as well as the seal. I used oil on the last one and it seemed to work okay. Although when I was pushing the big O-ring in, I did see that it potentially got pinched. So that'll be a fun leak down the road. So I'm gonna apply some grease here along this surface up here. And then a little bit on here. That guy in there. Oh, that went in way easier. And I was greasing the wrong side. I'm gonna grease where the balance shaft rides, see if that goes in easier. I am giving up on doing this seal. I'm gonna wait until I can pull the whole cam off to get that. My car has an 8mm and not the triple square. It has an 8mm hex. This is an early 944. The replacement bolt is a triple square, but as I said, I can't get the leverage. I don't have a good socket for that, so I will worry about that later. And then I'll also be able to do the gasket that's on the back of the cam cover. We got the balance shaft seals done. Now I'm gonna start reassembling my water pump. I cleaned off this surface with a razor blade, so that should seal well. So we're gonna put the gasket on first. These studs kind of help you get it aligned. Sneak our water pump in here. Why does that look wrong, folks? Why does that look wrong? Oh, no, it's okay. Now I use the old pump for my nut and bolt references, so I will start adding those nuts and bolts by basically taking them off the old pump and putting them on here. The water pump bolts are tightened to 10 Newton meters. Alright, there were 2 shorter bolts that hold this cover in, and then 3 longer bolts that'll go down here. Alright, I was able to figure out where the idlers go and the tensioners. The timing belt tensioner has the flange on the inside. Mine was rubbing on the cover, so I put the washer between the tensioner and the standoff that it rests against so that it clears the cover. I think this is an issue with switching over between the new water pump and the old water pump. The idler tensioner looks a lot like the timing belt tensioner, but the flange is on the outside. The idler pulleys, these guys up here and down here, should be torqued to 33. All of the 17s should be 33 foot-pounds. So this is 33, the idler's 33, and the tensioner's 24mm crank bolt, 155 foot-pounds. Okay, so I was watching one guy's install the timing belt, and he mentioned to get the play out of this, which I think mine's actually fine, but I want to double check. You will keep the lower portion of the belt on, turn the cam gear advanced at 1 tooth, turn this advanced. Can't go too far or else you run the risk of kissing a valve. You have advanced at 1 tooth. Now we should be able to sneak this up there and be able to pull the slack out of it, getting the cam realigned. And as you can see, I don't know if I trust that. Alright, take our 24mm spanner. You want to make sure the tensioner is rotated upward. He said the trick is it should be just enough tension that you can still hand spin this. You actually run the risk of over tensioning your timing belt, and then what it'll do is damage your water pump prematurely by putting too much strain on it. That being said, it would be good to purchase a tensioning tool if you are not familiar with how tight this should be. The other test is a 90-degree bend, which I can do. It's better to err on the looser side, surprisingly, some people are saying. And this is just fights me a little bit, so I think that's good. I'll hold this and torque the tensioner down to 33 foot-pounds. Now we're installing the upper balance shaft sprocket, and the Woodruff key lines up with the O. Your timing mark is going to be here. So for now, we're just going to focus on getting this Woodruff key lined up so that the sprocket goes on. You're going to want to put Loctite 574 on here, and you'll want to make sure the cover plate allows access to the spanner, the pin spanner, so that you can torque this to 33 foot-pounds. Now we're going to put the balance shaft belt on. You want to start on the crank pulley. Make sure your balance shaft tension is taut as you come around this side. Strategy to getting the balance shaft belt on is making sure that it's taut from here, from the crank to the lower balance shaft sprocket, and it's taut from here to the upper balance shaft sprocket, so that when this turns, there's no slack between these two, so that the alignment marks, here's this alignment mark down here with this notch on the sprocket lines up with this notch on the cover, and then the upper notch lines up with the top notch. Now what we need to do is get 1 millimeter or 0.5 millimeter clearance, half a millimeter of clearance for this roller to the lower belt. And we don't want it to touch this one, so we'll do the eccentric out this way. So we'll put our feeler gauge between here and just I'm adult and forgot to put this guide in. Unfortunately, I was able to sneak it in through here. Tension for the balance shaft should be able to turn it just a little past 90. These don't take a lot of tension. So now we're ready to take the lock off of the crank. I'm just gonna double check that it didn't move at all. But we have this lined up, we have the cam lined up, and then we have the lower balance shaft pulley lined up. So as I was saying, I just want to make sure that my crank is still TDC, and it looks like it is. I see the OT and the dash down there. I don't know if you're able to see that at all, but you're gonna have to trust me. Moment of truth. I need to go around twice with the crank and see if all the alignment markings still line up when I'm done doing that. So that was once. Balance shaft looks good. Cam is aligned. Okay, cam is aligned, balance shaft is within a tooth, lower balance shaft aligned, and is the engine TDC? Yes. Woo! I think all is good. All right, this was my very first time doing the timing belt, balance shaft belt, balance shaft seals, water pump, and I replaced the distributor cap and rotor. So this is the moment of truth on whether or not you should even consider taking my advice. I haven't filled it with coolant yet, but I just want to start it and make sure it doesn't explode. It should be okay. Should be okay. But it's still scary. Let's go! Time to fill the coolant back up and bleed it and do a little maiden voyage. Okay, I'm dumb. I had these on the engine like this, so then my timing was off. You need to use this one on the upper and this one, there, these are the lower, upper, okay? That one points to 1 o'clock, this one points to 7 o'clock when you have the keyways at 12, all right?